It's more than likely King Street between Wolfe and Newcomen Streets will be closed for years during the construction phase of GPT's proposed redevelopment of Hunter Street Mall. The company's lodgement of a road closure application is the latest indication it still plans to go ahead with the $650 million project.
I've always been quietly confident that the development will go ahead.
They've also applied to permanently close Lang, Morgan and Thorn Streets, as well as the King Street and David Jones car parks. That's caused concern among some Hunter Street business owners.
I think it'll have a significant effect on retailers and any of the workers that come to the city, particularly in the relation to parking.
Well, I think everybody who's in business here is probably very apprehensive about how that's going to affect our business.
The Lord Mayor says council will try to create extra parking at Honeysuckle, but retailers should be prepared to put up with some short-term pain for long-term gain.
But at the end of the day, it's got to happen because we need the development. We need that development very, very badly.
GPT's plans are open for comment until the 30th of January next year. Madeline Bond, NBN News.
The proposed Tilligra Dam was one of the few projects to avoid the scalpel in the state government's mini-budget. It will affect 150 landowners north of Dungog, and last night Water Minister Phil Costa met with a group of 7 who are yet to sign over their properties.
I spoke to them about the fact that the government has a position on this, and that is that we're moving forward with this, notwithstanding the environmental statement that's coming out.
The Minister says the acquisition of land was their number one concern.
Said to them that that won't happen until after the approval process is complete, and if all things come together nicely, then after that period, that'll be the time that we might talk about that. But
with the environmental study due out within a month, that could be sooner rather than later. Meanwhile, on his way back to Sydney, the Minister swung by the Branxton Water Treatment Plant to announce the delivery of a $5 million water recycling system. The system, part of a $17 million upgrade of the plant, will recycle 300 million litres of water each year. The Vintage Golf Course will be the first business to take advantage of the recycled water.
There's a whole host of uses, and what we're after is that water to actually go out into the community and be reused and lessen the impact on our water supply.
Lauren Bladwell, NBN News. Two options for the 5-kilometre road, which will bypass Maitland's CBD, were originally tabled for consideration. Both start at Flat Road, but the western route finishes near Maitland's Visitor Information Centre, the eastern route at the intersection of Melbourne and Pinticree Roads. The second option, favoured by the RTA, is inferior, according to local resident Kevin Hoy. He says it won't handle the volume of traffic and is flood-prone.
By comparison, the western route is totally flood-free. In the June long weekend floods, it was totally flood-free because it's protected by the Maitland Levee Ring.
But Mr Hoy's opinion seems to be moot, with the state government today calling tenders for the eastern route and announcing plans to start preliminary works early in the new year. Member for Maitland Frank Terenzini supports the RTA's decision and says he's satisfied the route is viable and safe.
I was very concerned that a review would cause the project to go off the rails and not get started for a long, long time. That was my main concern.
Lauren Bladwell, NBN News.
It's donors like Mark, Fred and Glenda who help keep our hospitals with a regular supply of blood. Giving the life-saving gift is something they say that has its own rewards.
I'll drive an hour for it. I love it. I enjoy it.
And you do it very regularly, don't you?
Yes, every fortnight.
Oh, I just give it because it just helps people, and especially little children in the community. I've been coming for about 25 years.
You have to give something back in life because you can't keep taking for it.
But the Australian Red Cross says it desperately needs more donors. Its stocks have been depleted over winter and Christmas is the service's busiest time of year.
We always have a great demand over the Christmas period with regular donors going on holidays.
It's calling on people who haven't donated before to come forward.
We're also asking APOS and OPOS donors to come in because they're the largest percentage of our population, so therefore those stock levels diminish quite rapidly.
Madeline Bond, NBN News.
Despite running last, without a win from their last 4 starts and with a range of discipline and suspension issues in recent weeks, Newcastle refused to concede their premiership defence ended with that loss in Wellington last night.
We're only 2 wins outside the 4. You get a run, a couple of wins and you're back in the mix.
Optimism is one thing, realism is another, and they know they can't have their best player doing this. Suspended now for 2 games, the club wouldn't be drawn on whether their soon-to-be marquee man Joel Griffiths will face further sanction.
Yeah, look, I'm not going to comment in relation to that at this point in time, but needless to say, we are conducting a review.
The club's CEO had more pressing issues today, namely challenging Mark Milligan's send-off in a submission to the FFA. But that failed too, with the Football Federation suspending him for 2 matches as well. At a time the head coach has been banished to the stands for poor conduct, the ill discipline is proving costly as a season slips away.
And as a club, we'll sit down and discuss it more during the week, but I don't think there's too much of an issue there.
Ironically, Wellington's Carl Dodd, who returned serve on Griffiths yesterday, didn't attract further punishment. Tennis and a boot camp have highlighted Newcastle's first few weeks of pre-season training, but things took a whole new turn today. In essence, the real stuff started today. Back-to-back sessions of conditioning mixed with football specifics is what's on the cards from now until Christmas. Not that it bothers Zeb Taylor. He's been on the ball for a while already, after incredibly feeling the need to bulk up.
I felt like in some of the games, I felt like one of the smallest blokes in the pack, and this year I wanted to really bulk up a little bit.
One of Newcastle's most consistent and regular performance in his debut season for the club, Taylor only has to look sideways to see the level of competition in order to keep his number 13 jumper. And motivation isn't an issue.
We're a young bunch now, and it's probably just only Simo and Gids that are the real old people, and everyone's just on the same level at the moment. So, you feel like during training sessions you got to give leadership towards the young blokes.
They'll have little trouble spotting him this season.
This is an opportunity for us to all work together and hopefully reach some consensus on the best ways forward to revitalise our CBD.
With views like this, it would be easy to get distracted, but it's the ongoing wet weather that's put the Caves Beach project a few months behind schedule. However, the developers are determined first drinks will be poured in January.
It's quite substantial and certainly we believe will be the premier tourist destination for Lake Macquarie. We'd like to hope for the Hunter.
There won't be a camper van in sight on the former caravan park when the rest of the $100 million development goes on sale mid-next year.
We'll offer 40 beach houses, 57 village houses and 131 pretty special apartments.
It could have some competition for guests, with Latec House in Hunter Street due to be finished in February and West Phoenix's new 100-room complex to open in March. But they could be the last for a while, with both Newcastle and Lake Macquarie councils reporting slumps in development applications thanks to sinking consumer confidence.
The last 3 months has seen a decline of about 25% on the previous year's figures, so we're seeing a particularly downward trend.
Penny Evans, NBN News.
Federal Minister Anthony Albanese was piped up the ramp at the Maritime Centre today. He officially opened the city's newly displayed collection of maritime history by ringing the bell from the 1899 wreck Regent Murray. He even cut a ribbon to mark the occasion. But when Maritime Centre President Peter Morris cheekily asked for another couple of $1 million to replace the centre's demolished wharf to allow large vessels to visit, the minister wasn't as obliging.
I'm here to open today's building rather than talk about tomorrow's funding.
Both state and federal governments have contributed to the centre, but a new wharf would be the centrepiece.
What is missing and is yet to come is the 65-metre wharf alongside our building.
And you made the point to the Minister today?
We gave the Minister an opportunity of how he could share in this great growth for our city and the stimulation of the city, and I think he heard.
Paul Lobb, NBN News. From sailing VJs on Lake Macquarie at the age of 10, Albie Bergen became a master of the seas. He competed in and won most of the world's great ocean races, including the Sydney to Hobart in 1962 aboard Rival. In his 80s, he took out the Brisbane to Solomon Islands race 3 years running, and last time we caught up with him at the age of 87, he'd just announced his retirement from competitive sailing.
After 77 years of sailing, I feel I've had enough, and I have achieved all my goals, won all the races that I set out to win, and I can do no more.
He passed away suddenly at the weekend, aged 93, to the shock of his 2 daughters and their family and friends.
Still sailing up till last week at the Sailability. He was round there and he was teaching the disabled how to sail.
He was a very, very experienced sailor. Wonderful navigator, and he'd always sort of teach you the correct things to do at sea.
He was a great ambassador for Newcastle, and he's got friends in Australia, New Zealand, Japan, around the Pacific Islands. He'll be pleased to know that Albie's resting comfortably and he's dropped his anchor in Belmont.
Paul Lobb, NBN News.
Traditionally, this week's sale is the last chance to get exports shipped before the holiday break, creating extra demand as the Italians rush to meet Christmas orders. But just 12,600 bales are on offer as growers hang out for better prices.
A small 3-day sale. A lot of growers have held wool and are waiting for our February sale for things to improve.
However, there's no guarantee that will happen.
It still is a risk, and we still don't know overseas whether overseas economies are going to improve in that period of time.
Brian Fittler has been classing wool in the New England for 40 years, but even he can't pick the market at the moment.
It's extremely frustrating for growers and for the industry in general.
Away from the fluctuations on the sale floor, he's one of about 20 wool classes in Newcastle this week, learning to deal with volatility of another kind.
You've got to please the grower and please the buyer and try to keep everybody happy in the shed at the same time.
A task that would have been a little easier this year with a good season leading into the festive period for once, if it wasn't for the humbug in the markets. Penny Evans, NBN News.
It was a sombre Newcastle Jets that touched down from Wellington last night, and while Joel Griffiths wasn't up for a chat, his coach said it all about that send-off.
Really disappointed obviously with Joel in the way that it happened. Again, he's very apologetic, but it doesn't get away from the fact of what he's done. You know, we can't condone the lack of discipline that he's shown.
The club is still reviewing its position on the matter, but the coach is just as concerned about what this is doing to Griffiths' long-term reputation. Coming off a stellar season, the now 29-year-old is one of the league's leading players. But Sunday's self-confessed brain snap was a throwback to the old Joel, who carried a history of disciplinary issues.
The leading goal scorer last year, the Players' Player last year, winning the grand final. It can certainly be turned around very, very quickly by a couple of poor indiscretions.
He'll have 2 weeks in the stands alongside Mark Milligan to ponder over that. But while there's life, there's hope, according to the coach.
Oh, very much so. I mean, there's 27 points on offer, and we're 6 points behind the top as far as the top four is concerned. So, as far as that's concerned, yeah, we're well and truly in it.
Jim Callanan, NBN News. A champion defender for so long, Cheryl Salisbury has made a habit of bobbing up for goal just when it was needed most. Now her club would like her to do likewise as a fill-in striker.
This might be Cheryl's swan song, and she wants to get more involved and score more goals and then just enjoy the game.
It'd be as a straight replacement for regular striker Katie Gill, who's been in great form of late. Automatically suspended for earning too many fouls, the skipper could fill the breach against the Central Coast on Sunday. That choice made easier with the impressive display of Swedish League defender Rebecca Smith in her Jets debut.
Definitely a lot of talent, a lot of skill, great coaching and leadership from the sidelines and on the field, so I think the team has really good potential.
Smith and fellow professional Sana Frostoval both paid for their flights to Australia to play in the W League during their off-season, but that decision was an easy one for the midfielder.
My mom texted me -10 degrees and snow, and to be able to be here on the beach and do the runnings instead, well, I can do that.
Port Stephens markets itself as many things, but the state's top area for falling behind on mortgage repayments isn't one of them.
It's a lifestyle suburb, so we're finding a lot of people up there who have second and third homes as holiday homes. They're getting out of those because they just can't afford to keep them anymore. So there's a lot of property on the market.
Thankfully, it seems there are still buyers out there.
We've had about 22 exchanges in the last 34 working days, so a lot of people are out there in the market still buying. They think that the market might have bottomed.
Away from the pool deck, Raymond Terrace and Cessnock also featured in the Fitch findings.
It's just the Bluebell area. They're the mums and dads that have been very badly hit by this economic downturn.
For many, other bills are piling up, particularly water and electricity. Retailers urging those struggling to seek help now and not wait for the final notice.
The whole aim is to try and keep people connected, to help them better manage their energy bills.
The Samaritans are predicting the next 6 months will be even tougher as unemployment rises.
As full-time work becomes part-time work, the number of people we'll be seeing each week will increase, and I think the level of disadvantage will increase.
Worryingly, donations to their annual Christmas appeal are down, as is sponsorship for the Christmas Day lunch in the park.
Just remember that some people are struggling more than they have before during this economic downturn.
Penny Evans, NBN News.
At 4:20 this morning, Cahaiba News Agency became the latest target of armed robbers.
One with a knife and two with screwdrivers. I said, don't be silly, don't do anything rash. Whatever you want, you take it.
They raided the store's safe and stole cigarettes. Police believe the same men hit news agencies in Ellamore Vale and New Lambton last month and Cardiff North News Agency early this month. Phil Gallagher says 5 men broke through the store's locked door, forced him to the floor and threatened him with weapons before stealing cash and cigarettes.
We're only simple working class people and they're getting us, which is not on.
Mr Gallagher is now selling his paper run and opening a sandwich bar to reduce the risk of being hit again. Meanwhile, Shortland News Agency's delivery room was robbed last Monday. 5 men wearing hooded jackets broke in, assaulted a delivery man and stole his wallet and phone. News agents say they're tired of feeling like sitting ducks. Many are so scared they've hired security guards to stand outside their shops in the early hours of the morning while newspapers are being prepared for delivery. Police say they're doing what they can to catch the culprits.
Look, at this stage we've set up a strike force Dominic, which is a combination of Newcastle, Lake Macquarie, Port Stephens commands.
Madeline Bond, NBN News.
In 1988, George Keegan was voted in as Newcastle's first independent state member of Parliament, ousting Labor for the first time since Federation.
It's all over. It's no longer a safe Labor seat. It's finished. It's gone forever. and anybody who wants to see the Newcastle from now on will just have to stand up and be the right type of bloke and do the job. They'll have to earn it.
He secured funding for a major indoor entertainment venue for the city and worked tirelessly for many groups, including Life Without Barriers, the Salvation Army, Red Cross and the Newcastle Show Society. The 80-year-old OAM recipient passed away in hospital last night after suffering a heart attack. News of his death came as a shock on the harbour front, where George had spent the best part of the last decade helping establish the Newcastle Cruising Yacht Club Marina and the clubhouse, which is just weeks away from opening.
He got so much pleasure out of just standing where we are now so often and talking about the future.
And I remember George saying to me one day that once he sees it all done, he's going to hand it over to the young fellas, as he called it, and let them carry it on. He was going to put a deck chair up on the veranda and sit back and just reminisce and smile over what he'd been able to achieve. And he'll be doing that from up above, I think.
George Keegan is survived by his wife, 4 children and several grandchildren. Paul Lobb, NBN News.
Macquarie Generation's Liddell Power Plant is in the heart of the Hunters coal industry, but it's dedicating reams of land to another power source. By the end of the year, it's hoping to finish commissioning a new solar plant, and thanks to a $9 million state government grant, it could double in size within the next few years to power 1,000 homes.
I think this expansion will cover something like 10 football fields when we're finished.
Developer GPT Group will also be harnessing the sun's rays, receiving $500,000 to develop the first commercial solar thermal air conditioning plant at its redeveloped Charlestown shopping centre, while $10 million has also been put aside for a hot rocks project in the Hunter to tap energy from within the Earth's core. The government has offered the grants as a sweetener to encourage more investment in renewable energy. Many overseas countries already offer subsidies.
That's a question for policymakers. I mean, the greater the subsidy, the greater the cost to the public one way or the other.
And whether the region becomes a green energy hub depends on one thing.
Whether or not it has very large-scale application, I think depends entirely on the success of the technology in terms of bringing down the cost.
Penny Evans, NBN News.
A change of pace at Jets training as Gary Van Egmond tries to lift the spirits of his struggling squad. Joel Griffiths showcased skills of another kind, but the coach is hoping he and Mark Milligan will use their round ball experience to good effect during their 2-game suspension.
I've spoken both to Joel and Mark. They've both said that they're going to make a pact to ensure that they can do as much as they can off the field.
Van Egmond will rely on his young Socceroos to fill the gap and will spend the week testing different combinations. Another option could be to push Matt Thompson into an attacking role.
If he wants to put me up there, I'd like to have a crack at it training a few times beforehand, and hopefully I can perform for the boys on the weekend.
One man who definitely won't play up front for the Jets this season is former Sydney FC striker Dwight Yorke.
The big issue for him is that the Asian Champions League games are going to clash with the World Cup qualifiers for Trinidad, and he's just really worried about the travelling aspect.
Meanwhile, Dutch winger Nyron Wow got his first chance to push for a contract this afternoon as the Jets try to boost their ranks before the Asian Champions League.
He's more so your out-and-out type winger. He likes to go past players from a wide area. So again, we haven't seen a great deal of him other than DVDs and little YouTube clippings.
Mitchell Hughes, NBN News. Relaxing in Newcastle this morning, Ryan Rowland-Smith is clearly loving life. The left-hander finally broke into the starting rotation at Seattle this season and showed he won't be intimidated. Having formed a bond with his Japanese catcher, the pitcher finished the season by conceding less than 3 runs in 8 straight games.
It just went to show that a young guy coming up, getting put in the starting rotation, and a lot of pressure on me, I can go deep into the games and keep my team in, and that was a big thing for me, definitely.
The 25-year-old admits there's still work to do if he's going to score a long-term multi-million-dollar contract. His first order of business: don't indulge in the holiday spirit and squeeze in some exercise.
Over there, they look after you big time when it comes to meals and stuff like that. So it's just a matter of, trying to, burn some body fat, get back in shape.
7 years after moving to the US, Ryan now feels at home, even though his country of origin still causes some confusion. But he says he's excited to be part of the rebuilding phase at the Mariners. The pitcher will return to the US in January for spring training. Mitchell Hughes, NBN News.
Look, I'm holding up. Still locked up in the room, but hopefully we'll be able to get out of the room soon. Just absolutely exhausted. Obviously haven't slept for the whole night, just relieved that the gunshots and the bombs have stopped going off. But really looking forward to being able to walk out of the hotel.
Thieves broke in at around 11 o'clock last night. They picked the lock on this gun cabinet and stole a .303 Lee Enfield rifle used in World War II and 2 replica pistols, a 9mm Luger and Colt 45.
Oh, well, it's an insult. It's nothing sure. You've only got to see what they do around with the memorials, with the desecration that they do with theirs. They've got no respect.
The club is devastated by the callous crime.
They've been donated, most of them been donated, and we'll never get them back or, never get any more like them.
RSL members believe the thieves knew exactly what they were after, as the stolen .303 rifle is still in working order.
They're not something that you just go to one particular place here, but with all of the guns and that are here to just pick from one particular item.
And they don't hold much hope of getting the relics back or the thieves being brought to justice.
What can you do? They get caught, they get a rap over the knuckles. You've been a naughty boy, don't do it again, they're on their way.
Madeline Bond, NBN News.
In September, the state government told Bickham Coal that its water study for a proposed open cut mine next to the Pages River near Murrurundi wasn't good enough. The company has since begun a new study about the possible impacts the mine could have on the river and has shrunk the scale of its planned operation.
It's shallower, it's further away from the river, and it's overall a smaller size, and that reduces the risks to the environment.
Bickham says it'll move the pit 300 metres from the river and will extract 36 million tonnes a year instead of the earlier figure of 47 million. The operation will create 100 jobs, but locals aren't convinced.
I think most people are very nervous about having an open-cut mine at the very, very head of the Hunter Valley catchment. That's where it is.
They say it's impossible to work out the potential impact of the mine on the river until the company comes clean with the full story.
How can we understand it if we are never given the details? I mean, it's a joke to hold a press conference and still deprive us of the details.
The company says there will be public briefings and consultation when the new plan is finalised. Paul Lobb, NBN News.
Former state member for Newcastle Bryce Gaudry has finally waded into the Newcastle rail line debate. He says GPT needs to explain why it issued its ultimatum after purchasing $100 million worth of real estate.
They've left it to the very last to play a poker chip on the people of Newcastle. They should have come out right from the beginning and said, yes, we've got this fantastic proposition, but by the way, we'll only proceed if you cut the rail line.
Newcastle City Councillor Michael Osborne says GPT still hasn't adequately explained why the rail line needs to go.
They say the rail line needs to be cut for their development to go ahead, then release the information, release the rigorous evidence-based information to the community.
And Mr Gaudry isn't the only new voice to enter the debate. Emeritus Professor Warren Pengilly is also speaking out.
We're one of the very few cities in the world that still has a rail to the inner city, and we're trying to cut it. And 100 cities in the United States have cut it and reinstated it. We're asked to ignore all this experience for some theory that I just don't follow.
Madeline Bond, NBN News.
The Jets players were feeling the heat at training this morning, but it's Newcastle management that is sweating over the signing of a marquee striker. The club is desperate to find a player who can provide an impact for the rest of the season, but he's unlikely to have the resume of a Dwight Yorke.
Dwight was certainly a one-off at this point in time, but that's not to say that there aren't a number of other players, quality players around that we're still looking at.
With Joel Griffiths and Mark Milligan suspended, Van Egmond must scour the current squad for a replacement striker. The fact Griffiths missed the majority of the Jets' last win will provide some hope.
You know, that's given the whole of the group a lot more confidence and they feel that they obviously can do the job with or without Joel.
Captain Jade North was also impressed with his teammates when both players were sent off against the Phoenix.
I think we did really well without him. I think, and we were cruising at 10 men, and I think we could have even got something out of the game with 9 men. So, like I was saying before, we can still take a lot of positives out of it.
One negative is the injury cloud hanging over 3 of the team's regular starters.
Not so good at the moment in regards to Adam Griffiths and Job and Song. So, we'll wait till Saturday and then decide
what the makeup of the team will be.
Meanwhile, the Jets youth team returns to action on Sunday at Energy Australia Stadium prior to the A-League clash. Mitchell Hughes, NBN News.
It was named the best performing rural hospital this year, but that hasn't helped Curry Hospital avoid the Garling Report's hit list. Inquiry Chief Peter Garling wants to replace the hospital's ED with a major trauma centre at Newcastle, saying it would help alleviate pressure on staff and resources. On average, 600 patients present at Curry's emergency department each month. According to the report, more than half of those could safely wait more than an hour for treatment. Not surprisingly, locals don't want to see their emergency department face the state government's scalpel.
Oh, I hope it doesn't, because we use it a lot.
No. I mean, there's too many industries and that around here, and I mean, there's a lot of people that do use the hospital.
The government seems to be closing all the, not looking after the hospitals much, and they should look after that, shouldn't they? That's why we pay our taxes.
no emergency department should be shut down at all. Because where do you go if there's an emergency?
The findings of the Garling report will be top of the agenda when the community meets with the local health advisory committee next week. They want to know why such a well-used emergency department has been targeted for closure. Lauren Bladwell, NBN News.
The Hunter boasts some of the East Coast's most beautiful coastline, but over the years the amenities and infrastructure surrounding many beaches have become run-down eyesores. A group of Merewether residents has spent the past year creating a draft plan of management to try and improve their local beach.
It's high time that the government actually spent some money on it and sort of brought it into this century, because it's a really beautiful asset.
They want more parking spaces, barbecue facilities and shaded areas for the community, as well as improved footpaths and cycleways. Today they handed their proposal to Jodie McKay and Newcastle City Council for endorsement. Meanwhile, Ms McKay has asked Hunter New England Area Health for a timeline about when Roundhouse at James Fletcher Hospital will be demolished.
It's one of the buildings, although not in Hunter Street, that people certainly talk about, that adds to the general decrepitness of the city.
Ms McKay has also requested this temporary fence be erected around the dilapidated Newcastle Bowling Club to protect it from further vandalism. But just how much it's costing taxpayers is unknown.
Well, I don't know the cost, and I don't think that's important.
The building will be demolished once the state approves a new development for the site.
We're doing the right thing in making sure that we're keeping people out, that we're keeping the site tidy while we work through an expressions of interest process.
Madeline Bond, NBN News. According to the Australian Bureau of Statistics, 40% of Australian women have experienced domestic violence. That's a startling amount, and the majority of men say it's not okay. They took a stand at this morning's White Ribbon Breakfast. Attended by almost 400 people, it's been organised for the past 4 years by a committee of 8 men.
Men, no violence, no silence. And that says I'll speak up, I'll tell other men about this issue.
Former Victorian Assistant Police Commissioner Lee Gasner was the guest speaker, talking about his involvement in establishing strategies against domestic violence.
It's about men standing up and saying it's not right. It's not leaving it to the women, who can sometimes be then blocked out by men not wanting to listen.
The younger generation was represented by local high school students, including Scott Gelzinis. He left schoolies celebrations in Byron Bay to perform at the event. The 17-year-old will spend the best part of 24 hours travelling, but says the message is that important.
I think that it's important for people in my generation, because I know it's enough to talk about it about everyone, but if we can actually stop it while it's young.
Lauren Bladwell, NBN News.
It was a special start to the day at Eleebana Public School. 3 of their own were given a rousing farewell before leaving for the Pacific School Games in Canberra. Described as the Commonwealth Games for school kids, only the elite compete. But in many ways, the whole school will be there, having all raised funds to assist their classmates.
And I think that it's really important for them to know that we're all going to be standing there and got a hand on their shoulder to wish them the best.
And they're a talented bunch. Jacob Rourke is the Hunters' only male basketballer going to the Games.
Basically, I'm just hoping to go down there and have fun, try our best, and hopefully we could at least come home with a medal.
It's a great attitude, and one reflected in swimmers Elise Peduti and Reese Pettit, both of whom have spent countless hours in the pool training for the biggest meet on the primary school calendar. But for each, the measure of success is simple.
All I want to do is personal best and maybe get in a final, but it'll be pretty hard.
I'm very, very excited about meeting them all, but I'm also excited about being in the marshalling area with people that speak different languages.
When only controversy has set tongues wagging in sports circles in recent times, this trio and the 70 or so more from the Hunter heading to Canberra this week are shining lights of what competing can and should be about. Jim Callanan, NBN News.
Finally free, Garrick Harvison was happy to be heading home.
It's nice to be outside and get a breeze on you and know that hopefully we're moving to relatively safety and just be out of here and try and get some sleep.
How would you describe it, mate?
Just harrowing experience, mate. Nothing you want anyone to go through ever.
Garrick became a prisoner in his hotel room, trapped for about 40 hours as shooting and explosions erupted outside his door.
The misinformation that we had and the speculation, that was the hardest, For the last 16 hours we were told, it's an hour, it's an hour, it's an hour.
He had just one thing on his mind, being reunited with family and friends.
Yeah, just looking forward to getting home and thank everyone back home for our support, their support and thinking of us. And
just one thing.
After 117 years of operation, the Waratah Bowling Club closed its doors last year. Sadly, it quickly deteriorated, becoming a target of vandals and thieves. Now the club is occupied again, but not with bowlers. The Ethnic Communities Council has left its cramped Newcastle headquarters and moved to Waratah, much to the delight of locals.
There's just a new level of interest and excitement to see that the facility isn't going to rack and ruin, that it is going to be available to the community.
An army of volunteers has repainted the historic club and turned it into offices, a learning centre and community space. The aim to provide services for multicultural groups, the aged and the disabled.
We've been working hard pretty nigh every weekend there's been somebody here.
Security has also been tightened. Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
What happens when you get suspended for 2 weeks? The coach makes sure you remain fit, rain, hail or shine. Joel Griffiths and Mark Milligan were put through their paces after their teammates had finished training today. Korean import Song didn't even make it onto the pitch and won't play tomorrow, rounding out what's been yet another testing week for the Jets.
It's a matter of those boys banding together tomorrow and really coming out and making a statement.
Newcastle still has experience, but it will be a Department of Youth which will, by and large, carry their hopes tomorrow.
The time is now, and the boys know it. The club as a whole knows it. So we've just got to be up for it and ready for the game.
And while a final decision hasn't been made, the first real indications from Noel Spencer that he's close to retirement after recent surgery discovered his Achilles injury was worse than first thought. He won't play again this season and is off contract.
Any businesses that are affected and farmers that are affected can get low interest loans at concessional rates of interest by contacting the Department of Primary Industries, or more particularly the Rural Assistance Authority in Orange. Any household that's affected, any residences that have suffered hardship should contact DOCS. There's still expectations of more damage at places like Manila and further downstream in Gunnedah when the flood peak hits there.